Why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. I wish I could put a big piece of paper over my face when I say that, so that you don't see how my face contorts when I'm saying humongous, because I want you to hear it like a radio voice from 1939 or 1940, when the voice came across the speakers of the radio to you, and you had to imagine what was behind them. But tonight's tale is a tale of two stories. It is a tale of the Ukraine. It is a tale of Vladimir Putin. It is a tale of what Russia is up to in Central Europe. Basically, we have a clash between two stories. Stories pull people together. Stories motivate people. Stories tell you what was in the past and tell you what you have to do next. Our story of the Ukraine is that the people of Eastern Europe, who were once upon a time a part of the Soviet Union, are hungering to be free. They are hungering for our kind of human rights, for our kind of liberties, for our form of government. They are taking to the streets and begging to ape us, to imitate us, to be like us. That's our story. And Vladimir Putin, a thug, a plutocratic thug, a thug who is living off the wealth of Russia, the oil wealth of Russia, the gas wealth of Russia, a thug who, along with a tiny group of cronies, contains or controls tens of billions or possibly hundreds of billions of dollars worth of the Russian energy industry. That thug is trying to move in, according to our story, is trying to move into Eastern Europe and take over. He is trying to put people under an autocracy, a one-man rule, in which the civil liberties that we live and die for, the human rights that we passionately believe in, do not count. For example, in which he can say that gays should not be promoting their approach to sex, and implying that there is a gay conspiracy to take over all of Russia and that it must be put down. A policy that is encouraging real thugs to beat up real people who just happen to be gay. Is that what Eastern Europe wants? Is that what we want for Eastern Europe? Not by a long shot. We want the kind of freedom that Poland has attained, because since Poland has become a part of the Western European community, it has become a model state, and it is doing extremely well economically, and its people are doing extremely well. At least that's our story. That's what we tell ourselves. What does Vladimir Putin tell himself? Vladimir Putin, in a speech this last Tuesday, a speech in which he gloated, or in which he legitimately welcomed the fact that the people of Crimea had voted in a vote that it was said involved 85% of the electorate, and in which over 95% of the voters voted the same way. They all wanted to be part of Russia. Now, why would they want to be part of Russia? Vladimir Putin gave us a hint when he referred to Vladimir the Great. Why did he refer to Vladimir the Great? Because Vladimir the Great was one of the original rulers of the Rus, the original Russian state. He ruled from the city of Kiev, and he sent his emissaries out to check the world's religions. Vladimir the Great did this in 988 AD, over 1,000 years ago. He sent his emissaries out to check to see which religion he should and his people should assume. Why was he curious about what religion he should assume? Because he was of Viking descent. He was a Viking through and through. And the Vikings had their own peculiar pagan religion. But that was not the religion that Vladimir wanted to impose upon his people. Now look, there's a controversy these days. The Slavs are trying to claim that the Kievan Rus were not Vikings, that they were Slavs. But the fact remains that all of the chronicles indicate that they were Slavs. Are there any hints that Vladimir the Great was, or not, they're not Slavs, they're Vikings? Are there any hints that Vladimir the Great was a Viking and considered himself a descendant of Viking ancestry? Well, at one point, Vladimir the Great's brother, this is before Vladimir the Great took the throne, became the ruler of the Kievan Rus. His brother started killing off his brothers. Now, why does a brother start killing off his brothers when they are vying for the throne? Because if one brother can kill off all the other brothers, he can guarantee himself the throne. How did Vladimir defend himself from his brother? He fled to Scandinavia. He went back home to the Vikings. And eventually he counted on the support of the Viking who ruled Sweden. Why? Because that Viking was a relative of his. And he got together a bunch of Vikings, military guys, merciless killers, and went back to Kiev and took control of the city. Now, do you suspect that he was a native Slav who came from the, or does it look like he was a Viking? Certainly looks like he was a Viking to me. Vladimir Putin, named after Vladimir the Great, in his speech on Tuesday, explaining triumphantly the acquisition of Crimea as part of the new Russian Empire, said that this was a place, that is the Crimea, so traditionally and strongly Russian that it was the place where Vladimir the Great had left Kiev and gone down to the Crimea to be baptized. Back to the story of the guys that Vladimir the Great sent out to check the world's religions. They checked out Islam and Judaism. Well, the Vikings like to eat. One of the things they enjoy is pork. The Muslims and the Jews did not allow the eating of pork and had various other dietary restrictions, and they weren't impressed. They didn't like the idea. They went to check out the Pope in Rome, and Rome probably impressed them. We don't know. But then they went to check out what we call Eastern Orthodoxy. The church in Rome, the Christian church in Byzantium. And they saw something they had never expected to see in their lives. They walked into a room that was 3 or 4 stories high. The walls were covered with gold. In that gold were golden birds and golden lions. And when they walked into the room, the lions in the wall roared and the golden birds in the wall sang. And they wondered where the emperor was. The emperor was the equivalent of the Pope. He ran the church in the eastern segment of the Roman Empire. They didn't see him. And then suddenly something started to descend from the ceiling. It was a gold platform with a golden throne. And on it was the emperor, who descended from the heavens back down to them. They were so knocked out by the awe that this inspired, that they felt the awe represented God himself. And they went back to Vladimir and told him that the church that was closest to God, the church that was closest to divinity, was obviously the church of the Byzantines. And Vladimir decided to adopt the religion, the Christianity of the Byzantines. Where did he go to get himself baptized? He went to Crimea. And this is the story that Vladimir Putin was relying on in explaining the deep importance, the traditional importance of the Crimea to the Russians. Well, the original Rus, the original Vikings, who used to take the native people captive and sell them for high prices down in the luxury town of Byzantium, Constantinople, Byzantium are names for the same town. Those Vikings were the founder of the Kievan dynasty, and the Kievan dynasty, the Rurik dynasty, that was the original Russia. In other words, the Ukraine is the original Russia. And when Vladimir Putin spoke on Tuesday, he spoke of traditionally Russian territories and reuniting them with what he called Mother Russia. And those traditional territories included Moldova, an entire state, and White Russia, Belarus, an entire state. Does this give the impression that Putin is finished acquiring new properties? Not at all. It says he intends to continue to acquire new properties where he has to protect Russian-speaking citizens, people who are traditionally part of the Russian Empire. Now, there's another narrative here, and that is that in 1992, when the breakup of the Soviet Union was being negotiated with the West, Putin will tell you that there was a guarantee, and the guarantee was that the European Union and NATO would not try to poach on the states that had formerly been part of the USSR, the Soviet Union, the Russian Empire. And ever since then, the EU has been breaking that deal. Ever since then, the EU has been trying to woo more and more of the Eastern European states that were formerly part of the USSR, the Soviet Union, into its midst. Make them part of NATO, make them part of a military alliance that is antithetical, that is hostile to Russia. And this, according to Putin, is intolerable. Plus, when it comes to the Crimea and the fact that the Crimean people, in Putin's view, voted overwhelmingly to be part of Russia, which any sane Russians would want to do, in Putin's view, Putin points to a war that we started, or we participated in Yugoslavia in the 1990s, in which we helped one city, Sarajevo, become an independent republic. We declared that the people of a city could vote to be an independent republic. And if the people of Sarajevo, says Putin, could vote to be part of an independent republic, why are we complaining about the people of another city, or several cities, the cities of Crimea, voting to be an independent republic? As far as Putin is concerned, the people that we think are Democrats in the Ukraine, the people who took over when Yanukovych fled, when the old corrupt leader fled, the people who took over are Nazis. They're thugs. They got there through bloodshed. The snipers that picked off civilians and policemen during the street demonstrations in the Ukraine, Putin knows who they are. They're the Nazi thugs who are trying to separate the Ukraine from Russia. In fact, right now, according to Putin, the Ukraine is in utter and complete turmoil, and Russian-speaking people who have been traditional parts of the Russian Empire are afraid for their lives. And there's only one person who could save them. There's only one alliance that could save them, becoming part of Mother Russia. So that Vladimir Putin, the man who brings peace, the man who brought us peace when the United States was about to rain Tomahawk missiles on Syria, so that Vladimir Putin can bring them peace. That's the story that Vladimir Putin is telling himself. That's the story he's telling his people. And he is reminding them that the Ukraine was the original Russia. Hence, Ukraine is Russia, period. And he's added Moldova and Belarus to that list. Then there's the big question. He's talking primarily about states in which there are large numbers of people who speak the Russian language and that traditionally have been part of the Russian sphere of influence. But how does he feel about Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia? They were captive states. They were parts of the Soviet Union, too. They are not Russian speaking. They are not of Russian descent. They're a vastly different people. The Baltic states were basically founded by a bunch of Germans who went out across the Baltic Sea and built ports dotting the Baltic Sea in order to bring in goods like timber and wheat and furs from the Baltic lands, Slavic lands. Those lands have not belonged to Russia, except relatively recently. Does Putin want them back for Russia? We don't know. But it pays to understand the thoughts of your enemies. It pays, according to Sun Tzu, to be able to walk in the enemy's shoes. It pays to understand his narratives. It pays to understand the story he's telling himself. And the story that Putin is telling himself, and the story that is being told to the Russian people, and the story that is being told not just to the Eastern Europeans who will listen to it, but is being told to you and me via the English section of Pravda, RU, which is a spokesman for the Putin way of thinking, and RT, Russia Today, television, which is directed at you and me in English and gives the Putin point of view. The stories you hear will sometimes curdle your blood, but you must learn to know them because you can't defeat an enemy assuming Putin is an enemy, without walking in his shoes, feeling his feelings, and knowing his thoughts. This is Howard the Among Us, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make. Or, now we have to cover my face so you can only hear my voice. It's radio. Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Among Us. The off button. Where is it? I found it.